Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks. Let's bring in our next guest for a cash tag segment, and that's going to be Landon Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio. Landon, 3 days in a row. Welcome, or 2 days in a row. Welcome back.
I'm on fire. Go.
All right, so we're talking booze. Good topic here. Constellation brands severely outperforming the overall market, just off all-time highs that we had in April, above $261. I think it's only down about 1%, 2% so far in 2022. Are we seeing good data out of this company because they seem to be managing the best in this particular segment?
Yeah, you know what? If you talk about recession-type companies, there's a few types of names. Usually has to do with vice that you're safest in, and so an alcohol company is not a bad place to park your money. But we want to know how they're doing compared to others, and so we look at the competitive landscape across Constellation Brands and some of their competitors, and you can see that they're actually kind of falling behind. Now, this is the beginning of the story, right? So you've got Bud, you got Tap, Coors up there, and you got Sam Adams. Constellation's brand very high on happiness, but struggling on purchase intent, and that's actually more due to the brand Corona actually falling off quite a bit. So when you look at Constellation brand among all of its brands, it's actually it's a little bit different picture. So you've got all the Corona brands, which they own in the U.S., and they're kind of down and to the left on these charts, right? So a little lower happiness, lower mentions, but the story I think is that Modelo is really doing very well. They are taking market share away from Budweiser in a very strong way. And so this is sort of the up-and-comer beer. It's the #2 in the United States right now. And so it depends on how you kind of want to look at it. You can actually see here, Modelo has got the red states, Bud Light's the blue states. So where you guys are at, Modelo is actually more popular than Bud Light. And it's kind of got that, Southwest and then some of the more urban areas with, Illinois, New York, and Florida. So it's definitely competing for #1. And I think this is the story that they're going to want to tell investors, is that we are coming after Bud Light. They've got a huge stronghold already, and they're expanding. So I think that's the story, even though overall the company, when you look at Corona Light, you look at hard seltzers especially, Corona Hard Seltzer is struggling big time. It is down about 52% on purchase intent, whereas all hard seltzers are only down 24%. I say only, but that's still a big drop off. But theirs is actually underperforming an underperforming category. So overall, I think that they're struggling with their Corona brand. They're really struggling with their hard seltzers, but the Modelo brand is gangbusters. It's doing extremely well. And so I think that's the story that they're going to want to tell investors. And that is the focus of their business. It's 75% beer when you look at revenue. Wine and spirits is only 20%, and then you throw in a little bit for the Canopy investment at 5%. So beer is the key for them. And I think that Modelo is probably the future when it comes to revenue because of the way that they're coming on and taking on Bud Light.
Landon, my personal favorite is Pacifico of these brands that they do, but you just kind of touched on what I thought my question was. They do a really good job, Landon, this company, and that's why you haven't seen the drop-off in the stock. Matter of fact, the stock has had a really good run here the last few weeks. They own bottling. They own a glass-making company. They own, the brewery, their own breweries. When they make, where they do well. So they've got a lot of the supply chain, but they seem to have a real balanced portfolio in terms of the brands that they have. They're pretty big into wine. Ruffino brand is a very popular brand of Chianti and other things. They've got a bunch of good, brands in their portfolio. But the question, Landon, are they literally going to be judged by how good of a beer company they are? Because you're right, Modelo, especially in the Midwest, is getting more and more popular, even ahead of Corona. So my question is this just a beer company with a couple good brands, or is this a balanced portfolio? It sounds like it's a balanced portfolio known as a beer company.
Yeah, well, if you look at their revenue, again, it's 75% beer, but they've got several brands. It's not just one brand of beer. So it's tough. I mean, I think that a lot of people, associate this with Corona, Corona Light. That is the main one. I think that they've got some of the more catchy commercials, but you look around and at bars and stuff, you do see Modelo out there a lot more than you used to. I feel like it is
Yep.
it is coming on, and so I think that they have a balanced portfolio, but if they're smart, and I know they are, they're probably going to start leaning towards the ones that are winning and shying away from the ones that are losing. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see a decrease in production or a decrease of emphasis on the Corona Hard Seltzer, for example. I mean, that one is really going down, even in an industry or even in a sector that's going down. So they're underperforming a poorly performing sector. Now, beer's doing well. It always will in a recession, and I think that they're probably going to, hitch their wagon to Modelo because that's the one that's doing very well. So they're diversified in that they've got a lot of options to have winners from, and some of those are starting to emerge as winners, and some of them are starting to emerge as losers. So I think that a company that's going to be dynamic and be able to shift and move with how the market goes. It's in a strong position if it's got a lot of different brands, and they do have a lot of different brands. So I like their ability to dodge and move and weave with the markets. And right now it looks like Modelo is the one to go with.
Yeah, on that scatter chart that you had with all the different brands that they own, I would have all of that over Bud Light, Landon, and I think that's the taste change in this particular space. Remember, Corona was their big name years ago. Is this something that somebody like Constellation Brands has to remember that, hey, taste change and there'll be another new popular beer? Is this the way that you look at this and the stock price doing well because the beer's doing well, even though Sam Adams, taking a big loss on their Truly beverages? But is this what you have to wonder about as far as consumer sentiment? Because we always know it changes, and you guys have the data on all these different brands, all these different companies that produce brands. Is that one thing you have to be worried about as an investor in this, or is this, is this sustainable for Constellation Brands?
Yeah, I think it's a strength. Honestly, I think that you have that many brands, and just like Kevin talked about, they own their own production facilities. They're investing $5.5 billion to upgrade their brewery and expand their brewery options. So, they're going to move with the times. And if you have a lot of potential out there, a lot of different products, and you see which ones are starting to move, you can shift your production to that way, you can shift your marketing that way. So I think that as long as they're nimble, which I think that they've shown that they can be, then I think that, with a good executive team, this is going to be a strong company moving forward. Right now, talking about earnings, going into earnings, not great. I mean, it's because they're being weighed down by Corona specifically, and then Corona Hard Seltzer, that's dragging them down. So we've actually got them at about a -17, pretty close to neutral, but not, don't love it. So I wouldn't be surprised if investors are a little bit hesitant after this earnings report. But depending on how the reaction is to the Modelo, then maybe it'll be a little bit more positive. I wouldn't jump in if you're bullish long term. I wouldn't jump in before the earnings report. I'd wait and see. Just like Nike, we're likely to see a little bit of a pullback maybe based on the score that we've got. But long term and short term, given that we're possibly heading for a recession or a little bit of an economic slowdown, alcohol is always a great option to be in. And just like we talked about, a lot of brands, a lot of options, production facilities, they can shift, be nimble, and put the product out there that the people are demanding.
So slightly negative on the sentiment going into this report. Maybe it's the Snoop Dogg effect, because once he starts doing Corona commercials, stocks, the brand awareness as far as Corona goes, hitting the skids here a little bit. But we'll have to wait and see. Good stuff as always, Landon. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, take care.
All right, that's Landon Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio, breaking down the data on Constellations. Now, Kevin.